Welcome back, everyone, to Red Spotlight. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, joined by Alexis Miranda this time. I know we've had another week off, and I hope you will understand that a podcast that tries to catch up with all of the things happening in the world of movies, you should understand, of course, there's so much going on right now, and unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world. As certainly none of us, I think, have as much time as we wish we actually had these days, and I'm just so very thankful that there are enough of us to be able to fill in for each other whenever we can't make it. So thank you to Kyle for jumping on. Of course, he was with us when we were basically dancing on Bob Chapek's grave, and then last week when we were talking about The Fabelmans and Glass Onion. And at some point, Peter will come back, or maybe he won't. I don't know. I guess it just depends if he makes it. Yes, but I that really wasn't hyperbole. It's actually an open question, and I'm sure if he listens, he would agree with that 100%. I actually texted him the other day if he was free for anything, and I think he responded with like ha 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 in capital letters. Just the insanity is just exuding off of his energy, and it's kind of hilarious, and also just kind of sad because he just can't do anything. And just to put into context the things that Peter has missed this year, so for one, of the two of us, I was the one that was like just spitting distance away from Bruce Campbell, and he wasn't at Comic-Con. That's just one of the things that, I got to do and he didn't. The Academy Museum, John Williams concert at 90 years old, Jaws in, IMAX. Oh my God. And then, of course, basically all the movies that we've been able to see that he hasn't. I think he has only been able to make it to the theaters once since July? No, twice. He's only been able to see Wakanda Forever and Pinocchio, of which he couldn't even be here to talk about. But I guess that's what it means to be in a all-encompassing hellish nightmare of a program that was, made to feel that way by design. So anyway, that's where we are. But. Nevertheless, we have, I would say, done the best job that we can, considering we also have full-time jobs that are, in their own right, all-encompassing, to be able to keep up with as much as possible. So for today, this is one of the examples of how we've been delayed certain ways. It's funny, the last time Alexis and I did a podcast by ourselves, actually just podcast in general, I don't even know. We were so delayed in talking about the finale of House of the Dragon. It had not aired in like 3 weeks. It felt like, and now here we are. Today, our main review will be season 1 of Andor, which, by the way, was just recently nominated for Best Drama Series, and I believe also Diego Luna was nominated for Best Actor in a Drama Series by the Critics' Choice Awards.
Nice.
So that's very nice. But that alone would tell you that, geez, guys, you're only just now talking about, the review of Andor. It's like, it's been over for like years now.
It's okay. We're trying to keep the conversation going.
Yes, exactly. We got to keep the conversation going in spite of, this was some much needed good news for Andor because, the results from the Nielsen streaming charts, to say that they have been far less than kind would be too kind, honestly, because, and you know what, there's a lot of things to say, but I guess, and there's trailers and there's other films and movies that we want to get into, but if there's a place, let's just go ahead and get in there now, because there's just so much to say, not just about the quality of the show, but also how it's been received. And, you might have heard some variation on this in the past, but there's a mixture of emotions at play here. And as with that, it's not all positive, as we can say. But that is our show today here on Red Spotlight number 425. And before we get into this conversation, by the way, this is me stalling for time. That way I can find the Twitter thread that I to read. Alexis, how are you, and how have you been these last 2 weeks since last we spoke?
I guess good.
Okay. Did you enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday, or as best you could?
Yeah, it was fine. We didn't really do much. We ate chilaquiles.
Mm-hmm. I assume you've been watching the World Cup.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I guess we can thank the World Cup for like taking up so much of your time. So I guess there's that.
Yeah, not so much anymore because most of the teams are gone now.
Yeah, they were destroyed.
Yeah. It's been kind of sad though. I mean, I've had to like record the games. Like that's how much I'm into this. Like I record the games and watch them after work because they play at like at 3, 10, and 12. 3 in the morning, 10 in the morning, and then 12. Yeah.
No. No.
But yeah, we just it was a lazy day. We didn't really do much. My family came over on Friday after Thanksgiving. So, yeah. I went to my first football game.
Why and where?
Why? Because my dad had an extra ticket. Where? In Phoenix. Asked me if I understood it. No. I was falling asleep. They tried so hard for me to understand this game. I don't get it.
Soccer and baseball, I feel like are really easy games to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Football, and I don't like watching anything sports related, like, ever. Like, I'm just, like, bored to tears. But, like, at the very least with, like, soccer or with baseball, I have a very base level understanding of, like, what it is, what you're supposed to do, and how you can win. With football,
I literally have no clue. I have no idea. And this is like all weekend they were trying to explain to me what was going on.
It doesn't help that I don't care, you know? Like, it would be one thing if I had if I really was like interested or had some kind of like fascination with it, but just like I feel like bored to tears is just the right like way of saying it, you know? It's just
yes.
And I've been at those NFL football games before. Ask me what I remember. Mm-hmm. I was just sitting there, probably eating some nachos.
I got fed popcorn because I was falling asleep.
And I was just enjoying the view. It's like I was at the park or something, just sitting there. I did not care whatsoever.
Me too.
So, well.
Apparently, it was an intense game. I have no idea how, but okay.
All right. Well, things have been, I would say pretty good with on my side of things. I'm sure people who follow the podcast know that, we went over to San Diego recently to go see some movies, and then as it turns out, I actually went back again on my own to visit some friends, of which we'll get into later, and saw more movies and did some more shopping. And I don't know if you've gotten anywhere on this, but as far as like my holiday shopping, I feel like I'm like 95% of the way done. And I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I think we have your guys' gifts already. And I'm not really buying a lot of gifts this year. Well, like we usually do like Secret Santa for my family.
At work?
But
at family? Okay.
Well, we do it at work, but since both of my managers have left, everybody's just kind of bummed, so we're not really doing anything. And then in my family, just like the four of us, we do Secret Santa, but my parents are going on a trip next year, and then me and David are going on a trip next year, so we're just gonna skip it. So I'm basically only getting gifts for you guys.
I appreciate that. I mean, you never need to do that, obviously. But I, as I said, of course, before, I genuinely do enjoy looking for stuff. I mean, did I dread it this year? Yes, because money. Nobody wants to spend money, and lately it's like, fuck, do we really want to do this? And then, well, once they get into the mood, or the spirit, I guess you should say, I found some really nice stuff across the board. I think you've already seen some of them, but really, really surprising materials that I can't wait for you guys to see. Once the day arrives, do you have any inkling as to when you will grace us with your presence next time?
I'm going on Friday, actually.
Are you?
Yeah, but just for the night.
Uh-huh.
So I have my like work holiday party on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm leaving like super late. And then I wasn't gonna go, but my aunt's having like her 60th birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gonna go and skip my work party, but then I found out that like they pay for the food, and somebody told me, I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody told me that they were gonna like charge us if we don't go, like if we signed up and didn't go.
What the
So
fuck?
I was like, and then they
It's a
kinda,
party.
I know. And then they kind of like guilt trip me into going, so I was like, oh my god, okay. So I'm just going for like 2 hours.
Guilt trip? You're basically threatened with a bill. That's the better definition of it.
I don't know if it's true or not. It could be false.
Well, either way, the impression was made to you. It's like, hey, there's a chance they might ding you if you don't go. And it's like, well, on that note,
Yeah.
I'll be there with bells on. Fuck off.
And then my mom told like my family that I wasn't going anymore, and then they guilt tripped me. So I'm like, oh my god, okay, I'll just go to both and make it work.
Your family sounds wonderful. Oh God, that's. I'm sorry. Okay, is the party being held anywhere near where I live?
In Tijuana.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say I could have the things ready for you to just pick up if you wanted to stop by.
Yeah,
but if
well,
it's
I'm
too
staying
far
in
out of your
Raleigh,
way,
like on
okay,
Friday,
well,
and then I'm leaving
okay.
in the morning, so it'll work. And then I can take your guys' too.
I'm having the hard time understanding when you say all this on a Friday. You have 2 parties on Friday. You're gonna be in Tijuana on Friday, and you're gonna stay here in Raleigh on Friday. I don't understand. There's not enough hours in the day for all that to happen.
And I work.
I don't get you. How can you make that work?
I don't know. I don't sleep.
That sounds awful.
Yeah. I'm like happy that last weekend was a lazy weekend. Like I literally did not. So my parents took my Fire Stick and put it in the living room. So I can't watch TV in my room. I did not leave my couch all day.
Is there any reason why they couldn't get their own, or why you can't just get another one?
I just haven't gotten one. Another one. Yeah.
Hint, anybody listening, that's a good gift that Alexis needs right now. Is a Fire Stick, because then your TV's useless.
Yeah.
That's awful. That's a damn shame. Well, I guess we'll be communicating with that, but we can just go ahead and get into this and/or situation. We've already gone at length about like what little expectations we had, and I'm sure, have done our fair share of bitching and moaning, I guess, about, the Star Wars fandom at large. And by the way, in case it wasn't, I would say, obvious at this point, that said bitching and moaning is not going to go away in this conversation, especially. So you have been warned about that. But it's like, I had mentioned this earlier on in the intro about, while it's good to see that from a critical standpoint, this show is just doing amazing in that regard. Great reviews after reviews, and deservedly so, and we'll get into the substance as to why that is. But as much as, and this is what I've always wanted, what I like to do on this podcast is not just talk about the quality of something, but also talk about how that something is being discussed. Because when you examine that whole conversation, you'll find things that you know for sure, you sure as hell don't feel and can like shoot that down, or you might even hear some things that you didn't even think of yourself. But it also gives you a different perspective as to like, you know, how people see it differently, and then also what they themselves look for out of these kind of stories, even if they can't really identify at all what that would be. So basically, as the show was going on and on, by the time it got to like episode 9 of 12 episodes, I want to say, the last Nielsen streaming like chart that was uploaded in the top 10 originals chart, Andor was nowhere to be seen. And if it was in the previous weeks, it was always like number 7, 8, or 9. And that's genuinely upsetting. It's genuinely upsetting because that, I feel, it also isn't really all that surprising, given what really is the general makeup of what we, I think, associate a common quote-unquote Star Wars fan to be. Considering the fact that, and again, this is an area, this is a subject, really, at this point, that this podcast has like examined for years and years and years. And it's always been kind of a sore spot. Well, I should say post 2017, it's been kind of a sore spot because up until the release of the Rian Johnson Star Wars movie, it felt like more or less everybody was like on the same page and just like on board with, you know, new Star Wars content coming out and it being, you know, generally delightful and exciting. And there were a few things here and there that were kind of like, you know, made your eyes roll. Like I remember when the Force Awakens trailer first dropped, or I guess the teaser, people were like, well, some familiar suspects that ended up like coming back up in the news were bitching and moaning of the idea. Because in that teaser, you recall, we got our first shot of John Boyega in the Stormtrooper armor. And then there was this like whole thing online about the idea of Stormtroopers aren't black. They're, you know, supposed to be clone troopers and shit. And like, okay, that's stupid, but I guess to an extent it was to be expected. And then came The Force Awakens, and it felt like everybody was like happy for a week, but then there was a blowback to it where it's like, well, yeah, it was fun, but there's not much there. And that's true. There's not much really there to begin with, but it was a really fun movie. And it just felt like what was born out of that first weekend, I believe it was Max Landis, the now since canceled Max Landis, made an infamous appearance on... This also involves somebody else who was canceled. Screen Junkies movie fights.
Oh god,
that was a whole thing. It was a whole era, which is now since gone. But it was that weekend where the term Mary Sue was like blasted into the consciousness of the fandom for the very first time. Not that it was like created then and there, but you can trace it back to that appearance by Max Landis when he was like so tearing down that film and labeling the particular character of Rey as a Mary Sue. That's where it goes back to, in that weekend of December 2015. And those were just like small little like appetizers for like what would happen. And it seems like there was a little bit of, maybe we had some like blind spots as to like how toxic, but how hateful parts of this fandom could be. And they were just like dying to like burst out.
Come out.
Yeah. And then came the release of the single best Star Wars film since Empire Strikes Back. And that's how we're going to talk about that film. I know a lot of people are turning it off, turning this off as soon as they hear me say that, but like, it is, that movie came out in 2017, and honestly, it makes me so mad still. Like, it honestly makes my blood boil, because like, I remember the excitement of looking forward to that film. I remember being with Nettie and Eric when, like, in San Diego somewhere, and the first reactions dropped from critics seeing the film, and they were like really, really good. Because, of course, as we know now, more so than ever before, Rian Johnson has never made a less than great film. So there was a lot of excitement. People were so excited about Rian Johnson, a much better filmmaker than J.J. Abrams ever dreamed he would be, ever will be. Making a Star Wars film. And then we saw it. And it was amazing. True to what I would say Star Wars really was. And a lot of us were just kind of like basking in the afterglow of it. I recall seeing it 4 times, I think, in theaters. It was so good. It was such a great film experience.
I wish I would have. I watched it, I think, that same amount, and I wish I would have seen it more.
Yes. Especially since what came to light, at the time, it seemed kind of funny. But in the years to come, it's become a mixture of enraging and then also tiring, because there are a lot of us that are of the mind. We saw something in The Last Jedi, which is, in Rian Johnson, he wasn't there to revere what was there. He was there to take what was there and say something and do something with it. And he was able to do that, or I guess tie in those themes with fully realized arcs that transformed the personalities of Oscar Isaac, John Boyega, and Daisy Ridley into actual full-fledged characters, and masterfully also was able to really fulfill the arc of one of the most famous characters in all of cinema, which is Luke Skywalker, and really bring home the themes, and I think also just the magic of what people associate with Star Wars in every bit of its forms. Even, I know one of the things that people immediately were like put off by in that film was the humor. And it's like, have you seen Star Wars? And and of course, and we have so many shows on our, history, and we can get into, and we did get into the idea that people seemingly have just lost touch with what those 3 films were, and have this other idea of what Star Wars is. And I mean, it was the most successful film that came out in 2017. It was the most successful film released on physical media of 2018. It was the smoothest production of any Star Wars movie to date in the Disney era. No problems whatsoever. And yet, and I feel like if you're listening to this and you're wondering like, well, okay, so people didn't like it. Well, that's not true. That can't be with what I just told you. So what happened was there was as per usual, a vocal minority. And legitimately, most people who are Star Wars fans and are also constantly on the internet, those people are not the general audience, which is why we have this association, because general audiences loved The Last Jedi, and it got great scores, and it did well, very well. Then you go online, and honestly, these days, all these years later, you have a hard time finding people who are as gung-ho about The Last Jedi as we are here. And you get this impression that some people have just like made the decision to not even acknowledge its existence because of how fucking toxic and batshit crazy a lot of these people are that go after them for having something nice to say about a movie. And the elephant in the room is this. The hate-filled people that we mentioned before took advantage of this, and we talked about it as it was happening in real time, captured the hearts and minds of a lot of susceptible, hopelessly naive individuals, that this right-wing, alt-right hate machine came along and capitalized, literally profited from their hate, and have made a living in tearing everything down. It's a whole business model on YouTube, and it's just a cycle that repeats again and again and again. And it isn't surprising that these people were the ones that were saying one of their main first critiques, and this is why it was always motivated by a political agenda. Remember the golden rule with conservatives and alt-right trolls is they project onto you what they themselves are doing to you. They latched onto this very popular talking point, which is, why are you inserting politics in our stories? Which, and I understand this seems to be something of a difficulty for any conservative-minded person to do, but if you just think for a couple of seconds about anything, especially that kind of statement, you'd know what kind of an idiotic thing it is to say that. Because, I mean, why wouldn't it be political? It's in the name. It's literally in the name. It is about the authoritarian fascistic empire being brought down by a revolution that is for, freedom and liberty. How do you I'm literally stammering right now, because how do you not consider that to be political? And sometimes you just have to laugh at these people, but I genuinely am not ever going to be upset by the idea that they have just they've so dominated the discussion that a lot of people are buying their bullshit, and honestly, hook, line, and sinker. And here, for those people who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just going to play the clip.
I was of the
This is George Lucas.
Angry young man.
Sure, you were a rebel.
I come out of anthropology.
Yeah.
So my focus is social systems.
Right.
And in science fiction, you got two branches. One is science.
Yeah.
And the other is social.
Right.
I'm much more of the 1984 kind of guy.
Sure.
I am
THX 1138.
The spaceship guy.
Yeah.
The spaceship. I got into spaceships out of cars.
Yeah.
I love cars. I love going fast.
Going fast.
So I like spaceships.
Yeah.
But it isn't the science, aliens, and all that kind of stuff that I get focused on. It's the how do the people react to all those things?
Yeah.
How do they accommodate them?
Yeah.
So that's the part that really fascinates me and I'm interested in.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s against the man kind of thing, nested deep inside of a fantasy.
Or a colonial, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats that don't know nothing.
That's right.
And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese.
Yep.
The irony of that one is in both of those, the little guys won.
Right.
And the big, highly technical empire,
the English Empire, right?
the English Empire, the American Empire,
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
But that's a classic.
You are idiots. Or maybe they're really smart.
I love that chef's kiss at the end of it where he says that was the whole point. So like if you're somebody that like spews this kind of talking point out there, you're openly admitting you missed the point of Star Wars, and that might also suggest that you missed the point of most things. I mean, if you can't catch that, and if you can't discern, like, again, this is where it's the conservative rotting of the mind, right? Because they're the people who came in there and they saw this opportunity to say, you're making everything political. And at no point does at no point does it occur to them, like, okay, well, what are the politics of The Last Jedi? Empire bad. Rebels good. Also, war profiteering really bad. Rich people are shitty. At what point did these become, like, I don't know, disputed things? Like, it felt for the longest time, everybody just accepted these things as norms. And so what's really being revealed throughout all of this is, no, what's really here is it's not the politics generally that are there. It's the idea that your ideology is repeatedly being criticized, and rightfully so, as it should be, because your ideology has produced disaster after disaster throughout all of time. Mm-hmm. You are a failed ideology in practice, and every time you somehow come into power, the masses suffer. That's just the reality of it. And there you had George Lucas just say that was the point. What was he thinking of when Star Wars came to him, right? And it's like,
I think my favorite part was, I like space. I like the ships. But that's not what the focus was.
Right.
Please.
And it's hilarious how these are the same people in some ways. Now all of a sudden they want this guy to come back into Star Wars when they kicked him out the door happily just like a decade before the fact. So again, these people have no consistency. They're idiots to begin with. But it's also, I think, look, the thing is, you hear the main Republican presidential candidate in the last two elections and a lot of their politicians and a lot of their fanatics were saying, like, fuck Antifa, fuck Antifa. Antifa is a terrorist organization. Antifa isn't an organization. Antifa is an ideology. It is being anti-fascist. So what are you saying about yourselves? Are you pro-fascism? Because, I mean, genuinely speaking, the reason why Andor, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a minute, part of why Andor is so great is because it's showing us, like, what a failed piece of shit way of thinking fascism is and totalitarianism is. And a lot of people today have seemingly lost touch with that very basic of concepts. Like, for example, Nazis are bad.
Yeah.
Adolf Hitler is bad. And yet, what have we seen transpire in the last, like, week? Is one of... Now... And I'm sure you will also, because I was having the same discussion, and it's like, I am so tired of, like, the idea that Kanye West was this musical, brilliant genius being thrown in my face. Now, for one, I don't really particularly appreciate or care for that particular genre of music, so I can't really discern for myself if he was great or not. Everybody tells me he's great. He's the best, like, of his genre or of his time, one of the best, whatever. Okay, because I don't have that connection to him, all I've ever known of that person was him being him being a piece of shit to everybody and everything. He's to his own wife, his own family. I mean, my first memory of him was being an asshole to Taylor Swift. Mm-hmm. And it only got worse from there. And we have just, of course, we can't forget, of course, when he went into the White House with the Make America Great Again hat. That was a whole thing, him being a Trump supporter for once. But he went all the way. Like, it snowballed all the way down to him outing himself willingly as somebody who says, why are we always associating Nazis with the bad guys? Why is the word evil always next to the Nazis? Saying things like Hitler didn't really kill 6 million Jews, or that,
they chose to be slaves.
Or that he, this is all in the last week, him saying that, well, I'm just done, quote unquote, or whatever it was, acknowledging that, like, I'm done with, like, only saying Hitler did bad things, and even going so far as to say that I like Hitler and I'm a Nazi.
Yeah.
When you go on an Alex Jones podcast and you have him feeling uncomfortable, that ain't good. Who, by the way, at this point, Alex Jones should have won an Academy Award. He's one of the best actors out there. Like, he can, like, I mean, that man willingly lost $1 billion in defamation lawsuits for just willing to stay in character on the stand. I mean, that's commitment. But less about him. That just happened in our, like, consciousness last week, and everybody was talking about it because, like, what is going on? Like, literally, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Like, the
like,
Nazis,
people defending him. Like, no.
Who's defending him besides the right-wing trolls? Like, who's defending him?
Or, like,
Who have you
saying that, like, still, yeah, I don't like him as a person, but his music, like, and I know we've had, like, conversations about this before.
First of all, we're not even talking about his music. That's, if you want, that's a separate conversation. We're talking about what he said.
Yeah.
Who he is. Who he has been. Right? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. It's just, no. I'm sorry, but no.
I mean, it's shocking, to say the very least, to have somebody of that, like, be that prolific, go on the internet and just, like, I mean, this has been an individual who has never cared if he sets himself on fire, but he keeps doing it. He keeps doing it. He literally said, I like Hitler and I'm a Nazi.
Because people are still, like, accepting of him, I guess. Because he knows that people are gonna not back him up, but, still sort of be there for him.
Yeah. And, like, for all the people who are, like, defending him because of mental illness, I'm done hearing about people defend him because of mental illness.
In the world.
He needs to be committed, involuntarily committed. If his family cares about him and they have the power to do so, conservatorship, involuntarily committed, get him away. Like, he is not well. He has not been well. And even if he was all the way well, it's clear that these beliefs are far more than just, what? Talk or hearsay. And a lot of people have also failed to mention the individual who was parading himself around in these talk shows was Nick Fuentes, who is the nicest thing you can say about him is he's a white supremacist. But it seems like he's now a Nazi as well as, I mean, a full-on Nazi, the same way Kanye West is. And in a lot of these clips, you see this guy just smiling. Yeah. Just openly smiling with, like, what Kanye is doing. And it's like, and this is, I don't know if people caught this. This is the same individual who weeks ago, when the GOP failed to capture the Senate outright in the midterm elections, he went on his show and he said something like, well, our ideas just aren't as popular as, and it's really, it's so gross the way he put it, is that, like, yeah, people, they like weed and people like being gay, and the way he put things is just so, I know, right? But he openly admitted that we just need, we need a dictatorship. He openly called for a dictatorship where it's like, we're not going to win, so let's just, like, take power and make them believe what we want to believe, which is what I've been saying, what these conservatives and Republicans have been wanting to do for a decade now. And nobody believes me. I guess people think I'm being so like dramatic or like they just flat out there and say it. So this, on one hand, you have this Nick Fuentes guy, a white supremacist that says we need a dictatorship, who is now promoting himself onto Kanye West, who just called himself a Nazi and likes Hitler. Gee, I wonder where this ends up going.
I mean, maybe there's a reason why he's saying it too. Isn't that what happened with Hitler? You know, he kept saying what he was gonna do, and
yes,
people just let him.
Yeah, people just let him. In fact, they elected him in the office.
Yeah.
Then I think the next day he burned down the parliament. I don't know how it went. It was a whole thing. But it's like, gee, by the way, these are two individuals, and people, I guess, forgot. These are two individuals who had dinner at Mar-a-Lago with the former president the week before. A former president who's already declared himself a candidate for 2024. So this idea that, like, why do we need to have so much content out there that's like, I don't know, so openly against fascism, because it never went away and it's kind of back in a way that we haven't seen since Hitler. Yes, it's back. It's back, and this is fucking scary shit. And it's like, if you're somebody who looks at all of this and it's like, well, you guys are being alarmists. I don't want to pull a George W. Bush here and like, if you're not on our side, you're with the terrorists. But you kind of are with the terrorists if you're like not like understanding how fucking serious this shit is. Also, if you're just like so willfully ignorant, you can't recognize for half a second this. Forget subtext. It's just the text of any story, right? So how does all of this go back to the Star Wars fandom? But because they've been infiltrated by toxic right-wing alt-right trolls that want to promote their ideology of hate. So much so that we've now gotten into this online culture where anything, as we've been talking about for years now, any particular project that is, you know, primarily featuring any kind of minority is immediately like review bombed, complained about. And I'll give you an example here by a great tweet thread, and it actually names some names here that we all know in this community. So this comes to us from, gosh, I wish people didn't get... Can you just put their fucking real names on their Twitter accounts, like Around the Galaxy at, okay, great, at ATGcast, okay. This is the number one Star Wars talk show according to FeedSpot, whatever. Wikipedia, okay, I don't know. Anyway, what's important here is the tweeter, the tweeters. The tweets, okay. People tell me not to give attention to the toxic Star Wars YouTubers by commenting on their foolishness. But once Star Wars Theory aligned with Geeks and Gamers in 2020, he became part of the problem. He tells people to be respectful, but he doesn't apply that to himself. The reason I call out We Got This Covered, Bounding in the Comics, RK Outpost, Geeks and Gamers, Star Wars Theory, and others is because the algorithm continues to give them exposure, and their unfounded stories begin to become considered fact by the average fan who finds them. When the fairy tales of rebooting the sequels, Kathleen Kennedy being fired, or infighting at Lucasfilm become the first things found on Google and YouTube, the average fan looking for real Star Wars information is given this hate-mongering as their choice of content. As their first choice of content, I should say. So it needs to be flagged. The truth needs to be told that Geeks and Gamers' family of commentary is driving political agendas, and Star Wars Theory has a bone to pick with Lucasfilm ever since they impacted his ability to monetize his fan film. Bounding into Comics and We Got This Covered ride on the backs of the clickbait sites by publishing unfounded news stories that they even admit to being made up in the text to drive clicks, which get ad impressions that get dollars. What I want fans to know is that there is money being made simply by having negative opinions about Star Wars. In some cases, their criticisms are fair. I have had my own critiques of the sequel trilogy. So have we, by the way, in case people were wondering, like here on Red Spotlight. We've had our own critiques of that trilogy as a whole, of the Book of Boba Fett and other content. But I'm balanced. My critiques are not based in politics or nitpicks to get clicks. They are fair and honest. I would happily discuss them, but since I am not making money from selling outrage and anger, I tend to not comment on what I don't like. Why would I? Why yuck on somebody else's yum? The click hate sites have spawned armies of trolls who traverse social media looking for people to say something positive about Star Wars, simply to spew the messages they were taught from the talking points of the YouTube jockeys. They make sharing a positive opinion a fight. That's the key part here. They make sharing a positive opinion a fight. So not only have the acolytes of the Jeremy, Ryan, and Theory created a large enough audience to make them money, they have made enjoying Disney-era Star Wars a constant struggle. They have bred an ugliness that, again, hurts the franchise. People become exhausted by it. They bully people into submission, and the positive voices are quieted or forced into arguments instead of positive fan conversation. It is vicious, ugly, and evil. I will not stop calling it out. I want people to know where it comes from and shine a light on the ugliness. The more people who know the methodology of hate for money, the more likely they are to know what they are in for when they watch it. I am not hoping to shut them down, but there is no warning on what people find, and these guys often come from a vile place. I'm going to repeat that again. These guys often come from a vile place. I know I won't change it, but if I turn a blind eye to it, I am no better. They have admitted that there is money in it for them. They politicize escapism. They make money from encouraging anger and unhappiness. And I would gladly discuss that with any of them face to face. That basically kind of encapsulates what I just spent half an hour setting up, which is these people are in it for the money. Mm-hmm. And they very well may hold these beliefs, but it's the best thing you can say is toxic. And at worst, it's just encouraging more of this really radicalization, this just behavior of hate. And it's just like people out there, I want them to listen to this and understand that the conservative machine has, if there has been one thing they've been successful in producing as an ideology, is they are the best people in terms of understanding what it takes to successfully hijack a conversation and turn the whole thing on their own terms. They know how to take a losing talking point and cause a big fucking distraction. Look no further than when years ago Colin Kaepernick got on one knee to protest police brutality. And we all should appreciate in a way how successful, because of how evil it was, that they took that moment, basically said fuck whatever that was about, and accused him of being disrespectful to the country, even though this country grants him the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech, which is what that was. And yet the right turned that into a talking point. They turned free speech into something to be against. It's like, and again, we all knew what free speech meant. It meant fuck Colin Kaepernick. It meant fuck Black Lives Matter. Because then they felt that their freedom was being, infringed upon when they were asked to wear a fucking mask in the year of a global pandemic. Which, by the way, hilariously, did not work out for them politically, because studies have shown in this most recent midterm election, part of the reason why Republicans lost was because they killed themselves at twice the rate that Democrats did by not wearing masks and not getting vaccinated, which is something we told them was going to happen years ago.
Yeah. It's crazy.
All of this is crazy, right? It's insane. So, Alexis, I know I've been talking it's a lot of setup, but your feelings, I'm sure it's more of the same here, but just like getting all of this as the setup, I think is important.
It is.
Because what
the show that we will soon talk about
Yeah, basically.
tells us or shows us for the first time in a long time in Star Wars, or maybe I don't know, maybe ever in Star Wars. But yeah, it sucks. Like, I remember talking about The Last Jedi to people, and
Was it fun?
just like, no, it
No.
wasn't. It was never fun. It was, and I just fully would like look at them and just be like, that doesn't like how like my
Does not
favorite is
compute.
like I don't like yeah. Like, I don't like what they did with Luke, blah blah blah. What do you mean? Like, or the Canto Bite scene, which is a big one. What do you mean? Like, I just don't understand. It was it was a very confusing time.
It still remains to be a confusing time, and I feel like if you ask people about that, it was just strange. I mean, you had people coming up with a whole bunch of like weird complaints, and I think
Yeah, and that too. Like, a lot of the complaints were just so stupid. I
like
remember the biggest
Carrie
one.
Fisher flying
like,
as
yes.
Peter Pan in space, and I'm like, what?
Are you joking?
That never crossed my mind. Like, really? That's a criticism of the movie? I mean, I guess that's
It
like
looks funny. Okay,
sure,
I'll
it's a
give you
nitpick,
that.
but it's like that's
But
not a
what do you
reason for why it's
mean?
bad. There was one of the ones that wasn't like just flat out laughable. Well, first of all, the whole anger being thrown at Laura Dern's character was so, I mean, let's just call it for what it is, misogynistic and sexist, because this was a character who was in a position of power, whereas a man, Poe Dameron, was not, and he was constantly being cock-blocked by her and her ability to like deny him. Even though the film flatly points out that she was in the right and he was in the wrong, and I guess that also pissed them off even further.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things,
and like that, they can't get past that.
They can't.
That
People complain that she had purple hair.
It was literally a full arc for him to learn and to understand, what the goal was,
Right.
and that they can't get past that she's a woman in power.
They can't get past that. I mean, to me, there's a lot to say. Obvious, and I don't want to really get this whole podcast on The Last Jedi, but like part of it needs to be because, okay, we're like 5 years after the fact now. And to me, and look, people are free to have opinions on on anything they want. I mean, we don't agree on everything, and no one else should ever agree on everything. That makes for boring conversations. I mean, some of the most exciting things we talk about are the ones where we like so vehemently disagree. I remember those like conversations in our early days of podcasting, the fiery ones, when we were just like, "You're full of shit," or like, "No, this is great," or "This is awful." It's not that. I feel like somewhere along the way, the public consciousness, and this is going to sound so elitist, but I'm sorry, I'm done caring if it sounds elitist, because clearly the general audience is done caring about films in general. They're just done caring about whether or not they succeed financially or not, and when they're going to get them on their TV at home. And they do that with every movie now that's not Top Gun Maverick or Black Panther or I guess Avatar. And it's just infuriating to me. We're living in a time now where they don't care about anything
Because
besides those three
we're
things.
Taught not to.
We're taught not to, in a way, yes. But it's like, more critically, from what we have seen in the responses to a lot of these recent movies in recent years, and maybe oftentimes why we on Red Spotlight like find ourselves in odds with like what most people would say either online or what have you, is, and again, I want to stress again, this is going to sound so elitist to say, but it looks like, if I'm just looking at The Last Jedi and the criticisms that people had again, like with it, it seems that a huge swath of the public consciousness has lost the ability to detect story arcs, characterization. They've lost the ability to pinpoint text or subtext or themes, where it's like, I guess it's kind of like a popular thing to take one random moment out of a movie, go on Twitter, and it's like, well, why did they do this? And why did they do that? And my response is, well, why don't you think about it? Why don't, like, maybe ask yourself, why was this here? Mm-hmm. And maybe you'll get to the heart of it. Like, people have now come to feel as if they can't understand why something was there, then that means the writers is at fault for that. That means the writing is bad, quote unquote. That means the movie is bad. If they can understand, and look, there is a lot of bad writing out there still, and there are a lot of bad movies, and we have talked about them, and that isn't to say that doesn't happen, but it's come to a point now where if normie audiences, for lack of a better way of saying it, if they see something and if they just don't have the depth to interact with anything on an intellectual level anymore. I'm sorry to say, but I feel like that's kind of like what's happened, right? Like, I mean, because this year, like, look at what's succeeding this year. It's all the stuff that freaking Ryan Murphy has out, like Dahmer. Okay. Sure. All right. Whatever. Well, what about, okay, well, we have some successes this year there was Stranger Things, sure. House of the Dragon was big. The Rings of Power was big. So I'm not saying that nothing can succeed. A lot has succeeded in streaming. But it's like, when you see like brain dead, like take after brain dead take, you start just getting depressed with like what it is that people want out of things. And one of the most brain dead takes, and remember, we started talking about Andor in the very beginning with, of all people on the internet, Grace Randolph being dragged for saying that there's nothing to discuss on this show because there weren't any Easter eggs.
That's horrible.
Like that just tells you.
And you know what? Like, I fully believe, like, even though she did get a lot of hate, honestly, I mean, not hate, but a lot of criticism, I think, well deserved, because that's such a stupid take.
Yes.
I think that conversation got bigger and bigger and persuaded a lot of people to not watch the show.
Yes.
And,
or even worse, maybe many of those people tried watching it and found themselves agreeing because they legitimately found nothing in the text of the show to engage themselves with. Which that's even sadder, because if they were not able to engage with the rich text that was in this show and the world-class characterization, but they were able to lose their minds every week on something that is basically a half, no, I was going to say half decent Robot Chicken. That's an insult to Robot Chicken. The writing's much better on that show. Just like half-written scripts that have no characterization, that have no substance, that repeatedly are comfortable with having nothing to say. I'm talking about The Mandalorian. All of this, by the way, is like, you know what happened in the backdrop of all of this? Just this week, somebody tweeted out the writing credits for the upcoming third season of The Mandalorian, which is set to drop March. And I want to just say, fuck you to Jon Favreau for ruining my March whenever that happens, because that's not going to be fun. What was revealed, if we didn't already know, which I think we did, but we might have just blocked it out hilariously. Jon Favreau wrote every single episode of the upcoming third season. And I kid you not, and I feel pretty comfortable in my prediction, it's going to be the worst season yet.
It's so weird though, because another thing that we're going to talk about today was Tales of the Jedi, and I don't know about you, but I loved it.
There were parts that I
and
loved.
How? Like, how could he go from that to Mandalorian? I don't know. It's just crazy to me.
Well, Favreau is not involved in that. That's Filoni. I think Filoni created it.
Favreau, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not saying Filoni.
I'm sorry.
Filoni. Filoni
okay.
deserves his fair share of flack. Let's be real about that. I feel I'm disappointed in his live action work, but I kind of feel like he's kind of been led astray.
Yeah,
because I feel like the worst tendencies that he has had as a storyteller, I think have been encouraged by Jon Favreau when it comes to live action. You know, because all the stuff that was on his own when it comes to the animated works, I've loved to really liked, you know? But then all of a sudden you mix them up with Jon Favreau and The Mandalorian and shit just went sideways.
Said, do it.
And it's like, you know, I love Dave Filoni too, but part of my thing lately with Star Wars fans is like idolizing him, like that he can do no wrong. No, I think he's done his fair share of wrong lately. And it's just that we don't agree on the wrong that there has, you know, that has been had, but you know, that also, I'm hoping people don't listen and think that we have been happy with Lucasfilm. We have not been happy. We were happy with like what, a few projects here and there post 2015. I mean, I can say maybe I've liked episode 7. I liked episode 8. I liked the last 30 minutes of Rogue One. The last 30 minutes of Rogue One. I liked the Clone Wars finale. I really liked Rebels. I enjoyed Bad Batch for what it was. It was entertaining. And Tales of the Jedi. Okay, I liked that. But everybody was like, they swear to God, like Rogue One was amazing. Mandalorian was the best thing ever made. You know, it weird. I haven't been happy. I mean, to me, like Rogue One, again, I don't think it works as a film. I think it's just so there's no characterization there for me. Well, there's more than Mandalorian, but like it's still not good enough for me. I think Solo maybe is good if like you're watching it in the background and not actually watching the film. But for real though, it's like it's such a nothing movie to me. Like it's like really it's so hard to me like to make a Star Wars film feel so like inconsequential and boring. Then came The Rise of Skywalker, which is like the worst. You know what? I have to go back and forth on it. I feel like I think it's the worst one because of how much was set up and how much you had going your way, and J.J. Abrams just fucked it up completely. And like it was a massive fuck up in every way. I don't think that's even debated. I mean, generally, I think that everybody agrees on that movie, and that was a fucking disaster. Mandalorian, I think, is shit, but people they love it and they swear by it, and it's like, oh my God, this is what I want Star Wars to be, and it's like, I don't get you guys. Like, there's no character here. There's nothing here. Then comes Boba Fett, and I struggle if it's between this or The Rise of Skywalker that's worse. But I think those two are without question at the very bottom of the pack with how bad they are. And Boba Fett was so embarrassing. Like when you just like when you basically sideline your main character for 2 whole episodes, and then that finale of Boba Fett, I think it's going to go down in history as one of the worst season finales of all time. Of all time.
I honestly haven't even seen a single episode.
And you shouldn't concern
I saw
the one. Yes, because that episode that you're referring to is probably the culmination of everything that I hate about this era of Star Wars. That episode, horrible. Which was like cameo, needless and useless cameo after cameo, where it's like, what am I even watching?
Honestly, like for me, it's not even that. Like I understand people's excitement in cameos. Obviously, yes. In these recent projects, it has been
excessive to say the least.
Overdone, yes. But like, what gets me angry is just the script and what was said in the episode that makes me so bothered, and it makes me angry that people are like, yes, this is Star Wars, when we have a whole other, like 8 movies to say otherwise. 8 movies, a billion shows, like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense that when they say like, "Oh, this is Star Wars," let's dissect. Let's unpack what they mean by that when they say this is Star Wars. Okay, so why? Because Luke Skywalker is present? Because R2-D2 is there? Because you have a character that resembles Yoda? Because Ahsoka is there? So you're telling me, you're saying now this is Star Wars because you recognize a character that you know. Okay? That episode.
What was the point?
You're right, though. It's not just the idea of excessive cameos. Is that Favreau consistently has shown himself to fundamentally misunderstand not just what Star Wars is, but what these characters are, who these characters are. And it's like, it's one thing to have characters that have no business being there. It's another thing to have those characters not feel at all with what we associate them to be. And it's been a repeat issue now with both the cases of Skywalker and Tano characters, where they come up and it's like the way they're written on paper and the dialogue that's associated with them, it's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. And like, I believe that is very well demonstrated in Obi-Wan, because I loved that show and there was a lot of cameos and obviously things that we know, but there was something to say at least, and there was something new to show us.
Right.
You know?
Obi-Wan, I don't think by any means was like great 100%.
Yeah, no.
But it was great in moments. And at the very least, it captured those moments. I feel Obi-Wan as a show had some very obvious weak points that really could have been easily fixed if they had just done a movie with it. You know, if it was a movie, we said this in our review, would have been, I think a lot of these issues would have like been fixed. But as a 6-part episode series, it had so much more going for it and so much more attempts at characterization. And, you know, I understand people who didn't like it. I think people go a little bit too harsh when they say it was awful or garbage. I don't think it was that at all. I honestly, I really enjoyed it. And up until before Andor, I was like, I felt over the moon. Like, wow, I didn't hate this. I'm happy.
No, yeah, I agree. And like, when we say like, you know, cameos this, cameos that, Leia was in most of that show.
Well, she was an actual supporting player in the series. She was a main character there.
And they did something with her. That's a cameo. That's a good thing to bring in that you can expand on and show us new things. Not have a character from a different show show up and then kill him and then maybe not kill him and then...
Or just be there, you know? It's like...
Or have a character show up and completely go back on what the character is
That's
about.
the thing that I don't understand. Like, I feel like Dave Filoni understood this in the early days of the Clone Wars and Rebels, which is like, if you're gonna bring in a legacy character, like you need to use them. Yeah, and their presence has to be justified. Jon Favreau does not believe in that whatsoever, because he just has them there to be there, and that's it. If you go back and look at episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels, like, Darth Vader wasn't around all the time in Rebels, but when he showed up, they got his presence and his character to a level of pitch perfection I haven't seen.
Yeah.
It was so good. And when Favreau comes, sorry, something fell on my desk. I'm so annoyed now. When Favreau comes along, that mentality just like flies out the window, like completely. And it's just bad. And so, as far as Lucasfilm has been, I mean, I haven't been thrilled with Kathleen Kennedy's leadership either, but that isn't to say that any of the hateful things that are coming at her direction from those other people we just spent an hour, ostracizing. No, I don't. Like I understand it's a tough job. Like I wouldn't want to have her job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody else, people want Jon Favreau in charge. God help me if he ends up becoming the executive of Lucasfilm. I'm packing up my bags. I'm going home. Wouldn't even bother. And it's like, you have to understand the level of writing that he operates as, where the post-credits scene of the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian was basically word for word what happened on Robot Chicken like a decade and a half before the fact. And that the Television Academy saw was worthy of being nominated for Writing of the Year.
It's so bad. It's wild.
This is a wild ride. It involves so many institutions and individuals, and it's it's true though. It's it's never, talking about Star Wars has never been that simple, really. Maybe we thought it was at first. We were so excited many years ago in the lead up to episode 7 that everything was just it was all roses and smiles and sunshine. And now we're at a point where it's like a freaking investigative reporting wall, and looking at all the different things that are happening left and right and what we want and don't want.
I mean, that goes back to what you were reading earlier, that tweet that when people research these things, this is what they get.
Yeah.
This
is what they find. They're not going to find our stuff, that's for sure, or much less positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it made me realize that for as much as I am annoyed, there actually have been a number of things that I find to be quite positive about, the Disney era of Star Wars. I like Force Awakens. I like Last Jedi. I like the last 30 minutes of Rogue One.
You got Clone Wars back.
I got the Clone Wars back. I love Rebels. I enjoy Bad Batch. I really, really liked the Tales of the Jedi. And I liked Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I loved Andor. That's a lot to be positive about.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been perfect. That's for sure.
The books are really good.
Yeah. Oh my God. I forgot about the books. The books have been amazing. That's right. So it's there's a lot to be positive about, and it's just been a sad state of things, honestly, where we at. Of course, it's not been encouraging that there's been no movement on any new Star Wars movies. That's a whole separate conversation.
I think that's gonna take a while.
It's taken a while, and it's gonna take more. It's been 3 years since the last Star Wars movie. Yeah, it's been a while. Anywho, with all that being said, we can go ahead and get into Andor, and more specific, we're going to talk about it broadly. But, there is very little from my perspective to criticize with the show. I think, on the whole, what is very obvious to many people, and I think you and I are in agreement on this, is that Tony Gilroy had a mission with this show. And maybe if it was intentional or not, what he made was something in complete diametrical opposition to everything that had come before. And that is, he had a story, and he had characters, and he had themes, and he had arcs, and he came to play with those. And he was not about, as Peter would say, this tomfoolery of green screens and freaking volume LED screens, and he was not here for the cheapness that has plagued a lot of these other shows. He came to play, and he came to push this medium in a direction that I don't think any of us would ever think. Well, it has needed it, but we just didn't think the sheer number of resources that went into this show and making it look as cinematic as it did, it just wasn't something we were expecting. And I feel like what he has delivered, even though it doesn't really have the spirit, the tone, clearly, of the sci-fi fantasy that we all know Star Wars to be, it has the inherent ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
It has more or less perfectly down to a science. What George Lucas said, well, was the point the entire time. And execution, apart from maybe one thing here, has been about as flawless as one could have hoped for. This has ended up being not just, far and away, one of the best television shows of the year, which is a pretty high bar. It's been an amazing year for television. This particular year has been pretty fucking great. Not only is it, I feel, the single best show on Disney Plus, Andor is so good that I feel like Andor needs to be in the conversation when we're evaluating the films and all of the other stuff on TV. If we put that all together in a theoretical Star Wars ranked anything, Andor, I suspect, would be near the top. And if for some people, I would imagine at the very top. Because what was, accomplished on this show were, quite frankly, moments of sheer cinematic brilliance that really has never been captured before with this particular universe. And to be fair, with the Star Wars films that I would consider to be good, again, the themes I think they have in common, but they were going for a very different tone altogether.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that separates them, which is what we said when we first saw the show and the episodes that we received, which was that this felt less like it was happening in the Star Wars universe and more so like it was happening in our lives, in the real world.
And I think that this franchise needed that. Like, I know that Star Wars has always been very not so, I wouldn't say heavy, because what it deals with, it is heavy, but
Sure.
It takes a lighter tone with it. But when you tell this particular story, I think that it needed to be this dark and heavy, because it's important to understand why things happened in this world, the way that it happened. And I think that they did a really good job in presenting it to us and opening up our eyes a little bit more into what world this is. Even though we knew, but we just never, I think we never told ourselves, like, no, like, was it actually that bad type of thing. You know what I mean?
No, I freaking agree with you. I don't know if I played this clip before, but here is another example of one of the people that was named Star Wars Theory on that thread. Here's a clip on what he thought of Andor.
It's just whatever. It's honestly a kind of a forgettable show. Look, acting was great. The cinematography was great. The budget was great. The writing was good. But it was just a lot of little things. I mean, when we saw the camera in the previous episode, there were like screws in the wall. When we see certain architecture, it's just bricks. It's not smooth stone or sandstone or whatever it might be that was in the prequels or the originals, which kind of gives you the feel of Star Wars. The whole thing about Star Wars is to feel like it's from a galaxy far, far away. It didn't do that with this one. The guns, the blasters, they look like actual guns. Little things like that took me out of it. I feel like it dragged on a lot in a lot of episodes that didn't need to. There were a lot of moments that really took took a lot. I think my favorite part of the show is probably the whole prison. It's just whatever.
So okay, you say that your favorite part is when they don't use weapons, mind you, they have to use the tools around them, and you pick a place where it's just white walls. And literally, it's a prison with white walls and lighting. That's your favorite when you just criticized that you see the screws on the walls? That the walls aren't smooth?
Also, at the same time, don't like forget what he just said there, which is like, keep in mind, he just said right now, it doesn't feel like it's part of a galaxy far, far away, which is the point.
Yes.
Yeah, but he looks at it a different way. From what I'm able to infer from the way that he said it is, the point or the key essential ingredient in which he looks at to measure if something feels like it's Star Wars is if it feels like if it's from a galaxy far, far away. And that, in his mind, is the point of Star Wars. As opposed to what I just mentioned what I shared with you half an hour ago on this show, which is that really eloquent and intellectually stimulating reasoning that George Lucas explained what was the point of Star Wars. This is what I mean.
Yeah,
when I said
it's frustrating.
Unbelievably frustrating, because it's like, how can we engage with people like this? Conversations are nothing without, having somebody to have a back and forth on. But when the opposition is constantly this, what he just said there was pathetic. Really? That was pathetic. That was just so bad. And Jesus. Here's something I actually want to read. It's a recent interview. It's a pro Brian Johnson tweets interview. So I just wanted to bring this up, and it is related to where we are. This was this was him responding to how his movie was being received. And this is what the interviewer asked. It was interesting to me that given the way you were talking about genre, what people got angry about was that you'd not done a proper Star Wars movie. The complaints ranged from really offensive stuff, like complaints about a female protagonist, to, I forgot to mention that was on the list of things that people were complaining about, to criticism about the way that Luke was written and portrayed. Was that something that was particularly painful for you? The reporter asked, or whoever was moderating the panel. Ryan responded with, no. And when I read what those people were actually saying, I was like, oh, I completely disagree with this. They're wrong. For me. Everybody can like whatever they want and not like what they want. And Star Wars fans, in particular, growing up as one, arguing about other people's opinions being wrong is sort of bread and butter of it all. I didn't feel crushed. Like, oh no, I didn't make a real Star Wars movie. I felt like, no, I did. I love this guy, man. I love this guy. He doesn't let that. Just I
Good
would.
for him.
I feel like if it were me, I would have been somewhat destroyed or angered at the very least by the.
I would have been angry.
I would have been.
Are you stupid? What?
Good for him though. That because there was so much vile hatred like at him directly, and it's like, I mean, if it hasn't been discussed already, when it comes to Andor particularly, truly some of the best scenes that will ever be in anything Star Wars related, some of the best acting that will ever be in anything Star Wars related, even the action set pieces, not necessarily for like the pizzazz, for the construction of the execution of it for sure. The only thing I can say that perhaps was a weak spot was that in the first arc especially, and maybe a little bit in the second arc, and what I mean by that is in the first two groups of episodes, which encompass episodes 1 through 6. Now, granted, maybe if I watch this season again all at once, perhaps there might be a greater appreciation for what happens in those first two episodes. Because in the first arc, we spent all of our time on Ferrix, which comes back into play as our main setting in the finale. And there are a lot of little intricate moments with small time characters that come back in a real big way in the finale. And perhaps if I watch it in one sitting, it might improve. However, understanding, of course, how great this is, for me, these are minor quibbles, but it needs to be said that when it came to the first few episodes in particular, the pace was a little bit slow. And mind you, I'm not somebody that usually has much, to say about slow-paced anything. It's like I never have any, usually don't have any complaints about things that are slowly paced, if it's earned. And perhaps in the first two episodes, maybe it was through the arrangement in which the scenes were aired. Maybe it was the particular way it was cut. But I would say more so in the first two episodes, I found myself not as engaged with, especially, however the rest of the show ended up being. Because I was riveted. I was thrilled. I was, honestly, it took my breath away how amazing this show was. Because when I saw that finale and the pieces fell down, even to the last moment when Stellan Skarsgård and Diego Luna share that smile with each other, it's like, fuck. That was all so worth it. That was a satisfying conclusion that fit thematically with the arcs of the characters and with the whole of what the story was trying to say. Finally, somebody understood it. And that's exactly what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi, by the way. This Andor and Last Jedi. Yes. Well, yes, it was. But both of these two projects are among the only ones that were helmed by a creative that had a story to tell with real substance and was executed perfectly, that in my view fit entirely, which is even more impressive, in line with the universe that it's set in at large. I don't think it's any hyperbole to say that this show was magnificent. Truly. Alexis.
I agree. I think with those first 6 episodes, I think particularly with the first 3 episodes, it was a little bit wait, what? It was a little hard to get into it, especially I think that first episode, but once I got going, I mean, that third episode, I think all of us were in complete shock.
The third one exploded, and then when it came to the 6th episode, it was like,
yep.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It was really, really cool to see.
What were what were some of your favorite performances? Because for me, look, I am so happy for Diego Luna, and Diego Luna does some amazing stuff here
he's really good, but the other people around him,
yes.
Oof.
But keep in mind,
he was just kind of the one that held their hands.
He was the main character, and the arc is his arc. It's his show.
Yeah.
It's also fair to state that by how the role is written, his performance by design needs to be more understated. you know? And it was, for sure. But because of that, he very clearly got, like, outshined by a lot of other people. In particular, and one of the tweets that I loved, or that I saw over the weekend that kind of encapsulated this, is, like, the idea that Genevieve O'Reilly was cast as Mon Mothma, but I don't think you see her in episode 3. At most, I think you see her have some scenes with Jimmy Smits and with Natalie Portman in amazing casting, by the way, those characters. But I think you see her in like 2 deleted scenes in Revenge of the Sith. And then that's it. That's how she got her start in this universe. And then she did Rogue One. And in retrospect, one of the disappointments with Rogue One was her barely in it. Like, she wasn't really in it at all. And so, among the many things to say about the true brilliance of the show is the revelation that is Genevieve O'Reilly, not just as an interesting, captivating character, but as a powerhouse of an actor. She made me feel things like you don't think you would have expected just by watching some deleted scenes or even Rogue One.
She made me feel calm and anxious at the same time, which is, I think, is the essence of her character.
Yes.
I mean, I wanted so much more from her. Yes. I'm so happy with what we got, but I want so much more. So much more with everybody. I think that you're right, and when you say that Diego Luna was it is his show and it is his story, especially with that ending. But I also think that it works because it's him learning from other people to get to where he is now. Right. And that makes complete sense. That,
but it's his show. It's like, I mean, it's maybe, to be further clear, it's his show, but not in the way it usually is for most other characters, right? So it's like his story is wound up in so many other characters' story, but it's really, the show is not so much about Andor the person as much as it is about, a person like Andor coming to the realization of revolution. Of, being a rebel, what it means to actually be a rebel in the face of authoritarian hatred, totalitarian, oppression. Yeah. That's the arc of the show. We start off with him just like, not giving a fucking thinking the only way to get away from them is to run away from them. And then he learns very brutally there is no escape. And then the whole arc bends at the end where he's like, at the point of risking being kind of executed by Stellan Skarsgård, Lufin, he just like, no, he risks that and he joins fully. That's pretty freaking incredible. But yeah, he had so many other players to work with, not the least of which includes the other main star here, which is Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh my god, are you joking? I can't. It's so good.
It didn't click. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of first of alls, but like when you cast Stellan Skarsgård in anything, I'm gonna be there. He's an actor that anytime he pops up, it's like, wow, you really classed up your particular project. I mean, I loved him as Bootstrap Bill on the Pirates of the Caribbean films. He was hideously disgusting in Dune as that. Yes. And then here, like, think about what this character really is. He's the grandfather of this rebellion. Like, he's the one that's been initiating all of the steps. He has been the one behind the scenes pulling the strings together. And it didn't click until, one person pointed this out somewhere on film Twitter, which was, in many ways, he is the Palpatine for the rebellion.
Yeah. And I mean, we get that amazing speech. And I mean, obviously, and or even that scene where he puts on the wig,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and he starts laughing. What did Palpatine do?
He acted. He performed. He completely, like, became a whole different person. Because that's what Palpatine was. He had two identities. He was Darth Sidious on the side, manipulating the Republic and the Separatist Alliance into warring with each other. All the while, he was the head of state. He was the Supreme Chancellor, Sheev Palpatine for the Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And only a few people were aware of that. But you wouldn't be able to tell. Like, his performance as the kind-hearted older chancellor was convincing,
Mm-hmm.
as was Stellan Skarsgård. And you saw in that moment, and we're kept at a distance when we see that scene, but it's like, that's him transitioning from one personality to the other. Like, he has to fully commit, otherwise the facade
Goes
lifts. It goes down, and then he's caught and he's exposed. Now, there was a moment, by the way, he has amazing moments with everybody.
Yeah.
With Mon Mothma, with Andor. I loved his scenes with Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera. Those are really interesting conversations. But speaking to that, on his way, well, the most memorable, of course, was that monologue that he had about him understanding that no matter what's going to happen, he understands he's not going to be able to appreciate or enjoy what he's working towards. And that was just so, like, when he says, what do I sacrifice? Everything. He sacrifices everything of who he is. But he's also a badass as well. And I don't mean to, like, trivialize it this way, but, like, truly, one of the most awe-inspiring moments of these streaming shows in general. And it comes in moments where you least expect it, because he gets caught by the Empire on a trip back, I think in the penultimate episode. And you're like, oh, shit. Like, your heart drops, like, oh no, this is bad. And I loved, and before we know what happens, like, his composure, so on point, so good, not even stressing about it, just playing them, stringing them along. And what happens as he breaks free and escapes was like, whoa, wow, this is a guy, this is a genius. He was prepared for this bullshit, and he got away. Brilliant. And all the while, I do want to say, I appreciate that this show, I don't think it would have been anywhere near as great if it was entirely devoted to fleshing out one side over the other. Because we got a lot
of Empire
into
stuff.
the Empire, and a lot of interesting characters and the politics that come into play with their bureaucracy. With the ISB in particular, basically being the Gestapo, if you will. If we're comparing it to the Nazis, the ISB is the Gestapo. And the main character we have there is Deirdre. And it's interesting because the show did such a good job of, like, I don't know, getting us to appreciate her and like her and, like, you know, rooting for her in a way, you know, in the face of her superiors. But then it also reminds you when it comes back, you know, to the finale, oh, yeah, she's also a fascist. Oops, I forgot about that. I was too busy, like, rooting for her in a way. But then, like, I mean, truly, one of the most standout moments in a sea of standout moments. And I would say perhaps the most horrific moment in all of Star Wars was that torture sequence.
Oh, yeah.
Where you had this basically Hitler Youth Nazi doctor explain to Bix, or is it Bix? I believe that's the character's name.
Uh-huh.
That, oh yeah, we have these, like, recorded noises of, like, children screaming as they're crushed to death. Let me play that for you on an endless loop. Like, what do you say to that?
Yeah.
And they recorded something for it. They were gonna make us hear that. No, I'm glad they didn't. But
I know.
It was more effective this way, but I didn't want to hear that. Oh my god, that actually happened. Again, this is a show that opened up with the main character in a whorehouse. That was one thing, but it's just like, it's so subversive that a Disney Plus streaming show, again, a show that's put out by the Disney Corporation, to be as upfront and out and proud with its anti-fascist politics as it is. Like this, we're just so used to the meat of these kind of stories being encumbered by the fact that they're being published or released by a company that is so allergic to expressing any kind of political thought. And the idea that this somehow exists and was allowed to happen, it makes you wonder, like, how did this even get made? Mm-hmm. Like, were they all just like too distracted with everything else that they just let this fly by the radar?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't know how you explain it. I don't know how you explain the pull that Tony Gilroy was able to get in him basically getting everything he wants with this show.
Mm-hmm.
Alexis?
No, yeah. It's a little scary. Especially when we go back to what we were saying earlier, that this was the least watched show. And it's scary to think that because of that, it's not gonna keep going. It's kind of, the Eternal situation all over again.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's well, I mean, what is good to know about this is this was a show that wasn't designed to last a long time, which on one side makes me sad because it's so good. I would want at least 3 seasons of this shit, maybe even more. Mm-hmm. But considering the realities of the streaming wars and shit, it's comforting to know that they can't really change it because it's filming now. So they've been shooting the second season. Mm-hmm. Second and last season as it was designed. Yeah. So it's like,
they're doing like,
too bad you can't do shit about that now.
Yeah, but at least we're getting something.
At least we are getting something. You're right, Alexis. At least, like, we, as in you and I, are getting something that we're able to chew on, as opposed to, like, whatever else the masses are receiving, which, is... Go ahead.
Another thing that I fully enjoyed and noticed right off the bat, we get to see many, many, many different worlds. Amazing. Every single one of them.
We weren't just on a desert planet the whole time?
Exactly. We were in a jungle. We've been in the jungle before, but it was different. And then we got to see so many different kinds of people, but like actually got to know them a little bit. And then I don't know. It was so good. And then the music, oh my god. Are you joking? So good.
Yes, the music. Sorry, I was just distracting myself and just like, this is an amazing tweet by @Mace Windu, who is far superior than the actual Mace Windu, which I'm going to deliver a preemptive fuck you toward. Again, that character is so awful, which we'll get into Tales of the Jedi. But the tweet that comes to us here from this person is, if Stellan Skarsgård doesn't win anything for this scene, and you know the scene, then there's no point in having an award show.
I think it's a tough award season for TV this year. There's so
you gotta
many.
factor in all the amazing performances from the other shows. That doesn't, I mean, not the least of which includes House of the Dragon, which, I mean, we've spent so much time basically saying it's one of the best first seasons any show has ever had. Like, genuinely, great. No, but it's, I mean, can we get into what were some of your favorite moments and or episodes? I mean, honestly, I loved a lot of the episodes. We didn't even get to talk about Andy Serkis yet. Oh my God, Andy Serkis!
Oh my God. You fucking kidding me? I could not believe what my eyes were looking at, what my ears were listening to. My heart was beating so fast the entire time. I was hyperventilating. Yeah, those episodes cannot come fast enough. He was so good. Oh my God. I'm so happy that he was able to come back.
Yes, because I mean, he was great as Snoke, but Snoke's
Damn.
barely a character. Snoke's barely a character.
Mm-hmm.
And here, I mean, I'm just so happy people have finally like come around and like looked at him as more than just a motion capture guy
Yeah.
and like be a respectable actor. 'Cause I mean, I think he's always been an amazing actor. Even it doesn't matter.
There's a reason. I mean, yes, he does the motion stuff, but there's a reason why people always ask him to go back.
Yes, because he's fucking amazing in everything he's in. He really is. And wow, those 3 episodes in particular were something that I don't think any of us, again, in theme with the show, we never expected them to do. Like, just those prison episodes with the brutality. Oh my God. Oh my God.
The emotion.
Yes.
It's so good. It's so too good. We
Yes.
definitely got spoiled.
It's too good. There's I would say also a show, we mentioned some big standouts, but this is a show that has a rich ensemble as well, where even the side characters or even the minor characters get some amazing moments here to shine. Honestly, I think my favorite episode still has to be the one, I think episode 7. And this came after the bank robbery, basically. And that episode was just consumed with like riveting conversation after riveting conversation. Some of my favorite moments were in the show where Mon Mothma was basically saying, in covert terms to, I don't know the actor's name, I just know him as Group Captain Townsend from the freaking Crown. Good to see that actor back. I hadn't seen him in a while. But this whole thing of her, about the Mon Mothma that people know being a projection. Mm-hmm. It was such a really, really great episode and great scene. And honestly, so tragic for her because she does sacrifice everything. She's basically offering up her daughter on a plate.
I know, yeah.
to a mobster, and it's like, fuck. That shit's real.
Mm-hmm.
Real intense.
Real intense. I'm glad that we get to see this.
Yes, yes, this side of it as well, and let's not forget Marva, Andor's mom, who, it was going to be a complaint of mine that she was so like unceremoniously like killed off screen,
Mm-hmm.
but then, well, she did get a final moment, and what a moment! That again, it is a show filled with the best monologues, but wow,
Yeah.
The town basically
Andy Serkis'
erupted.
monologue.
Oh, that's right.
Oh my God. It's so good.
It's so good. Like, this is the kind of writing that deserves. This is the kind of show that deserves the attention that Mandalorian received. And yet, why do I know that come March 2023, if we're still here, God forbid something happens, which who knows? But
Okay.
who knows? I mean, who knows, right? Like, everything could have been destroyed by that. But come March 2023, why do I know that when that damned show comes back, it doesn't have to do anything. It just has to come back. And I feel like the tweets are already written. Best Star Wars ever. Oh my God, it was amazing. And I'm going to be just baffled, sitting here like pulling my hair out like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Andor was so good. It is hard to see anything on Disney Plus ever coming anywhere near as close to amazing as this was. And it's gonna look bad because as it happens, Marvel Studios has a similarly toned series coming up in, I think, March or February with Secret Invasion. And nobody really knows what that is.
Yeah.
And no one, I think, for a moment pretends like it's going to be anywhere half as good. Which is the truth, really. Although I could be wrong. I mean, we've been surprised before, obviously. I mean, you want to give it a chance. Who knows? But like, it's Marvel after all. But then again, so was Lucasfilm being Lucasfilm. So
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? But like with House of the Dragon, I am upset that it's over. And I can't continue to keep enjoying it. And I want the rest now.
At least
Which
you
I-
don't have
yeah.
to wait 2 years.
Are we sure about that?
I mean, because they have been filming. I remember, like, I think it was even before the season aired. They were, so, you know, House of the Dragon is starting filming in what, March, April? So
Yeah. Yeah, that's that whole thing. So, I mean, I just, the show is so incredibly relevant, just so beautifully packaged together. It is, I think, the best of what storytelling can be in both film and in television. And it's a damn shame. So many people didn't see this and didn't give it the time of day. And I think that that fact alone is quite the damning indictment on the Star Wars fandom. That they absolutely could not bring themselves to support this show.
yeah.
Anywho, Alexis, tell me about your journey into Tales of the Jedi.
Well, I actually watched it this weekend. I feel like I knew I was gonna like it, but that first episode I think kind of took me by surprise a little bit. And so it got me more excited in what we were gonna see. And I don't think I was let down. Obviously it follows Count Dooku and Ahsoka. And again, going back to like Andor, like, or even Obi-Wan, like, if you're gonna reintroduce these characters, don't just have him show up and like not do anything. You know, these are two characters that are big in this universe, but they gave us a story. They gave us kind of like their motives to do things. And I don't know. I like that. I like when I see these things. I'm a chismosa at heart, so I want to know things. I think the most surprising one though was Count Dooku. I liked his a
Yeah.
lot.
The stuff with him, I think, was among the best material that we had to work with here. I, on the whole, would say that I really liked the show, but I don't want to say I loved it because I feel like I understand they were designed in part to be short. I think the stories they were telling would have been benefited if they had been longer.
Mm-hmm.
And explored a little bit more into it. I've always been somebody that was interested in Count Dooku, and I'm appreciative of that this exists, and we have this wonderful background, and you see the disillusionment in him with the Jedi Order, which makes all the more sense. And really, at the end of the day, it just makes Mace Windu the bad guy again.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I feel like, for the longest time, I wasn't sure if it was intentional, like how much the Dave Filoni's team was, or the Lucasfilm story group was like really making Windu seem like a dick. Because to me, it just got worse and worse. And the last time we saw Mace Windu was him basically saying, basically attacking Ahsoka for being a citizen, as she called herself in the Clone Wars finale, which was, yeah, it was a lot of hoopla there. But it's so freaking true to the character. Like how, while he seemingly doesn't view it as something that he does, he himself is a political animal. And, because he plays it off like he has no idea what he's doing all the time. But the idea that he used Dooku to get a seat on the Jedi Council, and suddenly it all clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's why you're the way you are. And that's why you deserve to die. And that's why, honestly, Mace Windu, you really became the face for the failure that the Jedi Order was.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you're just looking at your nails as I'm saying this, because just might as well just file them as we're talking about like just the sweet karma that Mace Windu inevitably got.
Honestly, he's literally the worst. He reminds me of those super religious people that
are hypocrites.
Uh-huh.
Down to their core. And yet they can't see the things that they do. Or they don't want to.
Uh-huh. Or they know.
They know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. And yeah, it touched on some things that we were previously made aware of, like the idea that, Sidious was seducing Dooku at the same time that he had a different apprentice, which was Maul. And while Maul being, well, to the galaxy's impression, he was killed, he wasn't, which we all know how that ended up going on later. It's a long tangent. Just go watch the Clone Wars. I'm not going to get into that. Which, by the way, Alexis, I understand that when you two were younger, you used to make your brother watch all the things you did. You need to get that man in his room, and you need to make him finish the Clone Wars. Because he's seen bits and pieces, but he hasn't seen the whole thing. So get to it. And then maybe he can lock you in a room and get you to see everything everywhere all at once and nope. Before, we get into any more of that out there. Anyway. But to the point, it was a really interesting, story to see how it all came down. Like, all this time, little did we know, some drama happened immediately after or during the events of the Phantom Menace off screen, where by the time we see Palpatine landing on Naboo, he already found himself a new apprentice ready to go, as he was able to get Dooku to basically execute Yaddle. who is a background character we saw in The Phantom Menace, but we didn't see anywhere else. And so that was
she was really good.
She was really good, really interesting. And also
yeah.
it did make me a little sad because she's a character we could explore more with, but she got killed.
Obviously, yeah, that's, we would have wanted that. But I think that they did that to kind of show that it wasn't just Ahsoka. It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, other people around were noticing what was happening and what was actually going on. Because one of the last things she said was, I stepped down. Like, I understand, what you're going through, and I understand your feelings about everything, but this isn't the right way to do things.
That's right. And it makes it all that more sad, because if Yaddle had gotten to Dooku a little bit sooner, he wouldn't have fallen so hard to the dark side. Damn. Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
So close. It almost even reminds you a little bit of like how close Ahsoka was to getting Anakin. Or like rescuing him before, and then of course, bullshit and shenanigans intervened and all that stuff. Oh my goodness. But no, of course, it goes without mention that the animation was beautiful. And I'm always gonna be down to see more stuff with Anakin and Ahsoka.
Yeah, that's what I kept saying too. I'm like, I'm always down for the trio to come back in animation. That episode. Oh my god!
I'm never gonna say no to it. I liked that episode, but there was something about it that really bothered me. Not because of what's in the episode, but because of why it exists. Now, I don't know if we're talking about the same episode, but that episode, well, it's basically Anakin and Ahsoka and how he's training her, which on its own and without thinking too much about it, it's great and wonderful. It builds the relationship between those two even further. It also explains, but this is, see, I like it, but then I also hate it. It explains why Ahsoka was so adept and why she is the Jedi that she ended up being. Because how well she was trained by the unconventional Anakin Skywalker. And it's all in true to the characters and what happens. But it just makes me feel like, in part, the reason for why this episode exists
was to answer how she survived.
Not only that, but how she... Whereas, unlike so many other Jedi, were just like so easily slaughtered and executed at gunpoint. I mean, to a T, she practiced with clone troopers shooting at her, and there's our answer for why she was able to survive. Where so many other Jedi were so ill-equipped to battle, battling against storm or clone troopers, and so when you think about it, it came across like. These are some of the things that the fandom has like questioned or complained, like, well, how was Ahsoka able to do this when the other Jedi were not? Well, here's an episode to explain that away. And that just leaves a poor taste in my mouth because, and I don't know, it feels like it is, and I can't be sure if that's why, in part, the reason this episode exists. But I'm just kind of tired of Lucasfilm, like, listening to fans' complaints. Like, dude, Star Wars fans are always going to have something to complain. It doesn't mean you have to listen to them and like address what they have to say in anything you do. Far from it. I would prefer you ignore their complaints. But like to take an episode like this and directly address one of the fan criticisms is just like, really? Is this what you've been reduced to? So that's what I was thinking. And it got in the way of me enjoying it. Because if you remove what I just said from it, it's great. It gives you the moments that you want. And it also makes sense with what happens in the show and for the characters and in the universe. But it put me off. And I don't know if you thought about that, but it's just what it made me think of when I saw it.
I didn't think of that at all.
Yeah.
And now that I am thinking about it, okay. But
I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I wish that we would have gotten more Ahsoka after
Yes.
everything. So
I will say it did, in both a good way and a bad way, it did leave me, the show as a whole, it left me wanting more.
mm-hmm.
Like, okay, clearly, because the Clone Wars was at times a little bit more than just about our main trio of characters.
Yeah.
At times it explored into so many different kind of story arcs. And so I've been saying for years, and I think Tales of the Jedi kind of like proves my point, that there is a large wealth of Star Wars fans that would love to see more stories told in this time period. As it happens, you have scripts written in the vault that you've just been sitting with, and you very well could just go ahead and
Do it.
animate them and do it and drop them, and people would rave, and because they would be full-length episodes. It's hilarious to me how, in some level, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau thought that the majority of Star Wars fans were aware that one of the canceled arcs for the Clone Wars was where Cad Bane trains and mentors Boba Fett. It's stupid because it was never finalized. It was never aired. In no way was that story even released. And somehow that was for the basis for the whole relationship between those two characters in the live action Book of Boba Fett. And people were supposed to feel something for something they, at best, maybe know about, but never actually saw. Like, you see this? Like, this is just. Ugh.
Yeah. But I enjoy the episode.
Yes.
I just love both of them, and I love their relationship. And every time I see them, and then every time that they get like sentimental towards each other, I just start bawling. And then when they cut to that scene, I literally I had to stop watching, and I was like, "Stop! You stop that right now!" I ran into David's room, and I was like, "You cannot believe what I am saying right now."
Oh gosh.
But it was good. I really enjoyed that first episode, though.
Mm-hmm. It was good.
I'm so happy that we got to see something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it could, in and of itself, can be used as a template for more stories like that being told, honestly. It makes me wonder, did I make a mistake in not, watching Star Wars Visions? Maybe I should go back and revisit that.
I know. Me too.
I don't know why it just, flew under the radar for me. Or I just didn't watch it, but maybe I'll go back and see it. Because there is an appetite now for those kind of anthology-like stories in this universe, which is something I've always wanted to see, and I thought we would see more of. But we kind of got away from that when at some point the company Lucasfilm and Disney made the decision to make everything feel the same, with literally the same characters. That's where it really got away from it.
Marvel, Lucasfilm.
Yeah. You know what? Before we go on to anything else, I do want to address something an elephant in the room. And I'm pissed off and I'm tired, and I want to respond to this. And it's something that I had mentioned. Well, I alluded to it when we were talking about the people maybe not being adept enough anymore to understand the text in a film, or even appreciating anything new, because as I mentioned in that part of the rant, that right now we're living at a time where, the Top Gun Maverick is back in theaters this month because everything else is just bombing left and right. And these were films that made, at the very least, a decent profit, even as late as 2019, but COVID just seemingly wiped that out, and this is, I think we're seeing in real time.
Well,
the damage.
I am not blaming it on the people anymore. I'm blaming it on the studios.
Well, no, they deserve a lot of the blame, but I don't want to completely absolve general audiences, because I think, you're right, I was going to go with this next. The studios, in some ways, train the audiences to expect this, because I think we're seeing in real time the consequences of Bob Chapek's decision to send certain films to Disney Plus, even after theaters reopened, which include Luca and Turning Red, much to all of our horrors, and Encanto even got that. They got a shortened theatrical window and got straight to Disney Plus. And what was his name? Jason Kilar, formerly of the former Warner Media, which is now Warner Brothers Discovery. But at that point, this decision to send all of their theatrical films to HBO Max on the same day and time that it would be in theaters, I think in real time we're seeing the consequences of those decisions, and it has proven to be disastrous, unbelievably so, for any film not under the Marvel umbrella. Even a DC film this year was having a hard time. Like, even The Rock couldn't carry a DC film. Now, granted, nobody knew who that character was, nobody cared about that character, and it comes from DC, which is a spotty track record at best. I understand that, but still, The Rock is a bona fide movie star to the point where he draws people to go to theaters. You would think that would, like, have more of an interest. Now, I'm not upset at that bombing, because I'm actually happy to see The Rock being brought down a level, because I think he's needed that for some time. I'm not interested in what anything he has to offer as a creative. I think he's just, like, creatively bankrupt, and I have no care with what he has to say or thinks. And I'm happy that the film is bombed. That way he's out of the way with, and James Gunn can do what he wants with DC. So that's that. But everything else is not being able to get an audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Glass Onion was able to do something in the 1 week it was in theaters, and then it was pulled, obviously, because Netflix wants that sweet subscriber growth. But right now in theaters, like, what is there? I know what was the new, and did you see it yet? Because I didn't know it existed until today or yesterday. But the new David Harbour movie, Violent Night.
Yeah, I went to go see it.
Okay, that actually was able to find an audience, and it might be hitting hard this particular holiday season. Of course,
it's pretty good.
From
It was the same situation, because I had asked my dad and my brother if they wanted to go see it. David usually says yes, but he was doing stuff. My dad was like, "Oh, I'll just wait." So I went to go see it by myself.
I'll just wait. And it's like, there's so many good options. Now, I think there's a lot of other problems that are compounding it, which is uniquely so. There were way too many movies released in November at the same time. Mm-hmm. And in such, and they were all very niche, and not only,
and it was during a holiday, which, like, okay, but like,
they were niche in their area of concentration for their individual stories, and then also the release strategies for some of these films. Like, some of them were wide, some of them were very limited. Like with Fabelmans, from what I understand, it was supposed to go wide, as in nationwide, on Thanksgiving weekend, and at the last minute, that was canceled. And so at the moment, it was like in 600 or so theaters, which was strange. But maybe they saw it coming. The disaster, it would have been an even bigger disaster if they had, like, went, wide with it. And a lot of the films that ended up that are bombing at the moment are some of the seasons expected to be contested awards entries, like She Said, Banshees of Inisherin, Till, even. That's a film that,
and
you think
I
would find
feel
an
like
audience.
you never really get, like, you get that one movie that, like, nobody's seen.
Yes.
But I feel like for this season, most of the movies are movies that are being released
in theaters, and you can't, and you are able to see it maybe, but people are choosing not to. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, with a lot of these movies that include The Fabelmans and Bones and All with Timothée Chalamet are going to PVOD in a week.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem, is they're bombing so hard that the studios have just given up, and instead of, like, giving the films full theatrical, there's two things. The studios are not giving the films full theatrical windows because they're not making enough, so they're just rushing it to PVOD. And the theaters themselves are just like, you know what? We got to kick this movie out because this is not making enough money for us, so we got to get something else in. And it sucks that these movies are just not finding audiences. They're just not, no one's in the mood to go see them. And this is where, where it enrages me with the controversy that the never ending controversy that happened years ago in 2019 when we discussed about what the comments that Martin Scorsese said. I think it is fair to criticize the one thing that he said was, to him, Marvel films do not trigger an emotional response. That's fair to say for him. Yeah, who cares if you don't like Marvel movies? Who cares if I don't like Marvel movies, right? It's whatever. But like a lot of people were concentrating more on that and him saying that Marvel movies were not real films, they weren't real art, and they weren't to be taken seriously. I think in the years since, I feel like people in the media need to move beyond that because that clearly was never what Martin Scorsese was really talking about. He was talking about the idea that the films that he enjoys most were being pushed out of the way in favor of the same kind of movies, which happen to be Marvel movies. And we've had now an endless list of names, whether it come from beloved directors saying something in the same vein as Scorsese, criticizing Marvel films for just being the only game in town. And then we have a Marvel actor, whether it be Simu Liu or Robert Downey Jr., even as recently as a few days ago, responding in defense of them being a part of Marvel. And it's like, I'm so infuriated because the media loves this story. The media loves this because they have something to talk about. And it's like the directors like Quentin Tarantino and Ford Coppola and Scorsese are always made out to be the bad guys here. And the Marvel actors don't even no one that is responding to the comments that these directors are saying, they're not engaging with the actual criticisms. They're just they come off as being slighted or insulted or offended. And they're like, guys, with what did Robert Downey Jr. say yesterday? And I want to read this because this was particularly upsetting to me, which was in response to the Tarantino. Tarantino said, Tarantino said that Marvel actors, they were not the stars of those films. It was the characters. And he was right. He's right. I mean, and people assumed, so Chris Evans and RDJ and Simu Liu are not good enough to be movie stars. That's not what he was saying. He was saying that the reason people showed up to those films was because of the Marvel name, not because of the actor's name. Sure, they liked them, and it was part of why they were excited about these movies. But they didn't show up because it was a new Robert Downey Jr. movie.
Yeah, no. How have the movies that they've done outside of Marvel done?
Awful.
Exactly.
They haven't performed well at all. None of them. None. And this is what Robert Downey Jr. said to Quentin Tarantino's comments, which was, let's just get over it. We're all in a community. There's enough room for everything. No, there's not.
Clearly.
There's not enough room for everything. And then, of course, Mauricio from Brown Table responded, I would be chill with this response, but saying there's enough room for everything is just incorrect, considering the powerhouse that is the MCU blockbuster, overtaking theaters for months on end. People who want to watch smaller movies will, but it's harder to do so these days. There's a reason why so many independent films are going straight to streaming now. Worse, even streaming services are assholes. They limit full theater releases for their own films so more people watch them on their app. Happened to Glass Onion. Just a shitty situation. And I think it's just even shittier that we have somebody who is so powerful like an RDJ that can't even see the argument that is so clearly there in front of all of our faces. And I'm just so done of this back and forth of this he said, she said, my feelings are hurt. And no one's talking about the real fucking issue. No one is. And it's one of the things, and I believe James Gray was the director that said this earlier this year, and there was a clip of him about where we are right now. And
if you look at the streaming movies that do the best,
right here.
I think the theatrical is essential. if you look at the streaming movies that do the best, they are the movies that come out in theaters first. So that should tell you something. But I think the movie business made a critical mistake. And really, it was not a recent mistake, but a big mistake. To think of it as, this film did not make a ton of money, thus we don't make that film. This film will make a ton of money, thus we make that one. A very strict balance sheet equation. Why is that a mistake? You'd think that's a no-brainer. That's any first-level MBA guy or woman or whatever should know that. Here's what happened, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. When you make movies that only make a ton of money and they're only one kind of movie, you begin to get a large segment of the population out of the habit of going to the movies. And then you begin to eliminate the importance of movies culturally. Yes. You lose, when you are so quarterly earnings bottom line minded, you lose I think, the big brain vision to say, look, I have no problem with a comic book movie. I have seen excellent ones made. I think Tim Burton's second Batman is a beautiful movie, and Michelle Pfeiffer's brilliant in it. I think what Chris Nolan does, and my friend Matt Reeves certainly did the deep dive with his Batman film. So I know that there are things that can be done in the genre. That's not an argument saying all comic book movies are terrible and they shouldn't be made. No, of course they should be made. The slate, though, the fact that it is no longer broad-based for theatrical by the studios means that they have forced a smaller and smaller and smaller segment of the population to like it. I'm going to make them an offer I can't refuse. And you know instantly what movie that is. Right. You cannot quote me a single line from Aquaman. You can't. So what does that mean? It means the cultural and the Academy Awards, they know it. Yeah. They sit around and they say, why is the viewership? Why is it going down? Yeah. It's going down because we did not make the investment in the broad-based engagement with the product. I know, maybe a movie that was made, Ang Lee movie Ice Storm, maybe that didn't make $1 billion, but you know what? It maintained broad-based interest. Exactly. So we've got to force it back. And you know what? The studios should be willing to lose money for a couple of years on art film divisions. And in the end, they will be happier. Because it'll come back. That's what I think. I think the theatrical is...
That's it. There it is. All of that and more. Yeah. And
it's just sad.
It's a very sad situation.
Yeah. Because I think, because, some people may see movies as, just like a whatever thing.
Throwaway, disposable pieces of entertainment.
And I understand, we were just talking about sports earlier.
Sure.
We have no interest in that.
Yeah.
I understand not
caring
for them as much, but would I want sports to go away? Obviously not. No. Or would I want, people to not enjoy them anymore? No. And this is something that, is going away by decisions that people are making, and it sucks.
It sucks because it feels like something's being taken away from us, particularly. Yeah. That's where it's so sad, It doesn't have to be that way. And what James Gray said there was the studios should be willing to lose money for a couple of years in the long run of maintaining interest in the theater going experience and watching films in the big screen. Because, and also some people would say well, why would multinational corporations that own movie studios be interested in losing money? I'm sorry, but they all were willingly able to lose money on streaming services. All of a sudden now people are those chickens are coming home to roost a little bit, and people want to press the brakes on the spending. But everybody knew the model for a long-term success in streaming was you're going to lose a lot of money at first for years and years and years. Everyone knew that. Yes. Because with the pandemic.
Yes. In sorts. But, and they're feeling it now.
Yeah. So. They're feeling it now, but it's it's still, if you feel, but I don't think it makes as much sense to invest that much in streaming service as it did with the theater going experience, because that made real dollars. That made profits. You know?
Yeah, it's confusing.
It feels like everything is just so ass backwards. Like, what? You feel like you're investing in the wrong things all of the time. And it's just sad that, you know, for me, as I feel like I'm on the fringes for saying that I went to go see a I went to go see a Steven Spielberg film in theaters. I am on the fringe because no one has seen a Steven Spielberg movie in theaters since 2018 Ready Player One, and that was bad. That wasn't very well liked. And it's like, it says everything when, like, for the last 2 years, a Steven Spielberg film has just failed to attract anybody to go see. And the last 2 Steven Spielberg films have been among his most interesting projects in decades. What?
Yeah.
Like, it's so sad and disappointing. And it's even sadder to see people repeatedly miss the point. So I know I spend way too much money on movies and going to the theaters, but I don't care. I don't do
anything else.
I don't do anything else, and I gladly do it because I'm able to get a lot out of it. Because, like, for me, movies are my main thing. They're my main source of enjoyment, not just entertainment. I mean, entertainment at a base level, but there's just something so, you know, riveting and thought-provoking about, you know, engaging with the film that stays with you, and it becomes part of who you are in a way, and you associate memories with them. And just like, for example, this past weekend, I went to go visit a friend. And we went to a small time theater called The Village at Coronado Island. And it was just like, it was a vintage theater. And we went to go see a small film, as in, you know, when we call small films that are not being shown anywhere. The Banshees of Inisherin, with Colin Farrell, Martin Gleeson, Barry Keoghan, so many other, you know, stars in the film. And it was just, I found myself just like, wow, this is a real, I mean, I guess it's so cliche and elitist to say it's a real movie, but it's a really intellectually stimulating film that has so much going on in it, and it makes you feel so many things. It's hilarious. It's tragic. It's really just one of the best films right now. And there's a lot going on in it. And it's just the kind of experience, and it's the kind of movie that is just so rare to find anymore in theaters. I mean, Glass Onion and Fabelmans. Kyle and I went to go see those films. They weren't playing anywhere near us. So we would drive 2.5 hours away, basically. And at least for me and for my money, and I kind of already had a feeling it would be this way, even though it's been an amazing year for movies. There's a lot of good movies out this year. Easily, both Fabelmans and Glass Onion were among the best films of the year. Among the best films of the year. And no one's seeing them. Mm-hmm. And it's just so... Anywho. Glass Onion will be out on Netflix later on this month on Christmas Day, so I can't wait because I've been itching to see... And I would have seen it again since I was in San Diego, but guess what? Netflix pulled it, so... I saw Fabelmans again the second time, and that I feel that movie, whenever you see it, Alexis, I want to stress that I think you should try and watch that film 2 times, not just once, because I think a lot of people, I've been hearing a lot of podcasts about that film, and not for most, but for some people, I've gotten the impression they've walked away from that film after a single viewing, just like, I liked it, it was good, but was that really it? And that's a little bit, I feel like some people are going to feel. Kyle and I really, really like the film. And it's stayed with me a lot. And I so much that I wanted to, I mean, I was always going to, but I wanted to watch it again a second time. And it's just like, it's really good. And it's like so moving. And some of the camera movements and the scenes that are captured on film, I think are among the best sequences Steven Spielberg has ever captured on film. That's saying something for a Steven Spielberg, and it's something worth seeing for sure. But I think that there's kind of like a simplicity to it that I think people are going to be like, don't expect, and I don't know if you listened to our review of it on the last podcast, don't expect a film that's about like the movies that Steven Spielberg makes. If you want to watch that, there's a film out there for that already called Spielberg. The HBO documentary by Susan Lacey. This is not about him being a movie director. It's about him discovering that he loves movies, and that's what he wants to do. And the family that he was birthed into help form his identity and the struggles that he experienced. It has a lot in common with, of all movies, Boyhood. But whereas Boyhood by Richard Linklater was much more experimental in its execution and less structured, I don't think there was a screenplay or a script. It was just all kind of like improvisation and just like making it up as we go along on a yearly basis. This has, with all due respect to Richard Linklater and to Boyhood, because I do love that movie, this has obviously the direction of a Steven Spielberg and the narration of a Tony Kushner. Well, I guess the screenplay of a Tony Kushner that make it that much more structured and grounded and emotionally and better acting overall. Gabrielle LaBelle, who plays Sammy Fableman, the main character here, I don't know what it is about this industry, like, not appreciating young actors. He's the main character, but, like, he should be talked about more often. Michelle Williams is great. And there are a lot of things we can get into, and you see it about things not working here and there. A lot of people were like, they weren't as interested in the films delving into the family drama, which is like, really? Okay.
That's what
it's about. That's what the movie is about. And it's like, I feel like a lot of people are talking too much about this movie with the connection to Spielberg. I think no matter who makes the movie, it has to work on its own as a story. You can't just have, I think there are some things that you will, like, I guess, get more out of if you're familiar with Steven's life, but you don't need to be for the film to be able to work on its own. I mean, in theory, no film should depend on anything else to be able to be understood. So, and I think The Fabelmans on its own tells a very simple story, but a very meaningful one that's going to, and has, from what I've seen and I've shared with you guys, has resonated with people who are like-minded and who are in this space. And it's like that quote that Carrie Fisher said once, take your broken heart and turn it into art. This is a story about, you know, it took this long for him to make this movie because basically, for the first time in his adult life at 76 years of age, this movie is basically him forgiving his parents for what happened. They're not here anymore. And that, in part, is what caused him to tell this story. So it's a very emotional one. This was never going to be, I know it's been talked about a movie about the movies, but that's Babylon. Babylon is more, which we'll get into that. This is much more personal. This is much more deep, I would say, interesting to me. You know, and I think emotional as well. So I'm hoping you guys like it whenever you see it. And I don't know if it's playing anywhere near you, but it'll probably be on, unfortunately, it'll be on PVOD. And you can probably just like stream it somewhere at some point. Unfortunately, that's how, oh man, that's how the game is these days. But there's that. So that's definitely worthwhile. And if I haven't been talking about Glass Onion as much as Fabelmans, is because I'm controlling myself, because the last time I talked about a Knives Out movie so much, I ended up ruining it. Just if you end up listening to our episode about Glass Onion, we talk about the film, and I guarantee you there are no spoilers. Even though at one point Kyle says there's a spoiler, it's not. I don't know why he said it was a spoiler. It's about Kate Hudson saying something that was a joke, and it was funny, and it was hilarious. But if you want to listen to our reactions, there are no spoilers, trust me, on either of the films. Because Glass Onion is oh my God, when you see it, oh my God, we're going to be talking about it for a long time because it is great. And I'm honestly thinking, like, the more removed I am from Glass Onion, the more I'm thinking it might be better than Knives Out. And I love Knives Out. Yeah. I think Knives Out's kind of perfect. So I didn't think that way when I first saw it, even though I really, really liked it. So now it's like, the more it's in your head, like, wow, that was really, really, really good. Anywho, Pinocchio, if you haven't seen Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, for anybody that's listening, it drops on Netflix this week. By the time this episode's online, you can already stream Pinocchio on Netflix. And we all enjoyed the film greatly. So That's a must watch, and currently the front runner for best animated feature. Later on this month, we're gonna get The Whale, Brendan Fraser's much acclaimed performance in theaters. We're also gonna get Babylon. I don't know if it's gonna be playing anywhere near us, but from Damien Chazelle, it'll be 3 hours and
I know. We
8
had to
minutes.
wait a long time for La La Land, so we'll see.
That's true. But I'm excited about Babylon. I feel
am too.
I think there are going to be some things I'm already expecting are not going to work as well for me, but the overall thing just looks so exciting. You just want to see it, you know? So that's the real movie about the movies. It's about an era of film. So that's a highly anticipated one. And I know you're going to hate me, but you know what? I told you that I saw Avatar again in theaters with what's his name? Oh, you know what? I forgot. Peter didn't just go out and see Wakanda Forever and what was the other one? And Pinocchio. I went to go see the re-release of Avatar with him. That was my first time watching it in almost 10 years. And you know what? It's a good movie. It's actually a really engaging film. It's not the best, but we talked about it before, the fact that the things that bring that movie down are kind of obvious. So I'm looking forward to it. These reactions are like, I was expecting, honestly, the magic to fade, the magic with James Cameron, not so much with Avatar. I know these are initial reactions, but you know what? It's a blockbuster. It's a James Cameron film. I like his movies. I like his sensibilities as a filmmaker. I'm going to see it, and I'm hoping it's good. So we have all that in theaters coming out.
I want to see it. I just don't want to see Avatar. But I know I have to because I haven't seen it in a long time.
How about don't? Like, I mean, you know, it is, if anything, Top Gun Maverick should tell us that we don't need to appreciate anything that comes before, much less like it, you know, to enjoy what that currently is. I think Top Gun Maverick did it right, where it's like, amazingly so. I don't like Top Gun.
I don't like it either.
That movie just didn't grab me. And I think I was falling asleep in moments. But Top Gun Maverick, wow. I mean, it made you cry. So it's like, you know, it's possible. Who knows? Like, I think there might be people who don't care about Avatar, but end up going to The Way of Water, and it's like, this was much better. I far prefer this. Fingers crossed. We get that experience. Anyway. I mentioned again, I watched The Fabelmans again. It was great. It's a must-see. It is so... It reminds me so much as to like why, more than any other filmmaker, I see a lot of myself in who I am in Steven Spielberg and vice versa. And I know that sounds a bit like, you're saying that you're as good as Steven. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like who he is as a person, as a human being, as a soul. I feel so much in tune with who I am and who he is, basically. And this movie kind of reiterates that. And it's just, it's a Steven Spielberg film. Of course, I was going to like it, and it looks like I did a lot. I also rewatched Tar, and it's great. And you know, one of the aspects about Tar that's not, I guess, assumed if you watch the trailer, which is kind of deceiving in a way, there's a lot of scenes in the trailer that are not even in the movie. And I don't know where that came from, but like Tars, there's some moments that are just so I mean, Fabelmans was really funny, but so is Tar. Because there's this moment where like Lydia Tarr, the main character by Cate Blanchett, is like in such a low. And she's obviously a conductor and she plays music, and she's visited by the landowners, and they're like asking her if, you know, she basically would shut up and not play music during hours because they want to show a recently vacated space to tenants. And she was like laughing in their face and like, oh no, we wouldn't want that, and then slams the door in their face, and then like gets an accordion and starts screaming at the top of her lungs in response to that moment. No, the film is weirdly funny, and Tar, as you've been seeing, has been winning a lot of awards, and for good reason. It is a great piece of film, if there ever was one. And I'm legitimately convinced, even though, you know, Michelle Yeoh has some fight in her, I think she can still pull off this win, but it's going to take all that she's got to get that Academy Award, because she's got some amazing competition in Cate Blanchett, Michelle Williams, it's not been talked about as much, but it's not impossible Viola Davis could get a nomination for The Woman King, and she was amazing in The Woman King, Viola Davis, which is also a really good film in its own right. So yeah, I watched that one, and of course I mentioned that I watched The Banshees of Inisherin, and it is a Martin McDonagh film. It has this like, it catches you off guard with, you know, this very approachable, if at times comedic way of itself, and then it also reels you in but catches you off guard with how brutal and depressing it can get as well. So did you ever see Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri from 2017? If you didn't, it's fine.
No.
But it's a great movie. And if you would like to, we have it on our. Oh, you have. If I were you, I would like to get a flavor for like how Martin McDonagh does. I would watch Three Billboards first, and then Banshees of Inisherin, for those who are not aware, is going to drop on HBO Max sometime this month. So that would be a really interesting double feature. But there's a lot of power and emotion in Three Billboards that I believe Frances McDormand won her second Oscar for Three Billboards. She was amazing. And so were other people. Sam Rockwell was amazing. Woody Harrelson was amazing in Three Billboards. It was a great film, and one that a lot of us were convinced was going to win Best Picture. That was an exciting year where we had a three-way race between Three Billboards, Shape of Water, and Get Out. Three amazing movies, and three films no one thought would ever like be the kind of like Oscar frontrunner. And as for where we stand this year, I still think it's between Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Fabelmans. A lot of people think Fabelmans are like, it's like out in front. I think it's more out in front to win director. I don't know about picture. I'm thinking Everything Everywhere can win. That's where it stands. Real quick, I really enjoyed both Indiana Jones and Guardians trailers. Transformers, I don't care. Nothing in that trailer made me care about anything. Alexis?
I liked the Guardians.
Yeah, you're not really a big indie fan. I like a lot of the Indiana Jones films. I mean, obviously I'm a big Spielberg fan, but I think those films are legitimately great. And I even do enjoy Kingdom of the Crystal Skull more than a lot of other people. It's not great. It's got problems, obviously, but I genuinely enjoy the film, and I'm looking forward to this movie. And it's going to be crazy from what the leaks suggest, so that'll be interesting to see. And I'm just happy for Harrison Ford that he's able to have one more in his career like this, because he loves this character.
He loves, yeah.
So, by the way, happy 80th birthday, Harrison Ford. He turned 80 this year. So did Martin Scorsese. He turned 80 this year.
Dang.
And yeah, I mean, Dick Van Dyke still kicking at 96 or 97, I believe. So, hey, let's appreciate. And also, I should mention, I don't know if you I told this to you, I'm sure, like Stephen Sondheim and Angela Lansbury's final credits are now in Glass Onion. Yeah, they were in the movie in Glass Onion. Stephen Sondheim and Angela Lansbury.
Where?
They had a cameo when they were talking in the new movie with Benoit Blanc. They were on a Zoom call.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I cry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Aww.
Which is now the second Knives Out movie in a row that has a final performance, because in Knives Out, that was the final performance of Christopher Plummer, who was 90 when he was on the movie.
Good.
That's no.
And I think it's a Rian Johnson thing, because
Carrie Fisher. Oh. That's the third movie in a row he's made where somebody was their last performance.
Oh no.
Oh my god.
And these are big names.
These are legends.
Maybe stop doing that.
That's creepy.
That is, yep.
That's legitimately creepy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something. I forgot. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I also saw A Christmas Story 2. That's on HBO.
I didn't know that existed until a few weeks ago. How was A Christmas Story 2?
It was really cute.
Okay.
It very much is like
The same movie
first
again?
one,
Yeah.
but it's cute. And I like that movie in my family specifically means a lot because I have an uncle, like my dad's brother, who that's his favorite movie of all time. Like, you know how it plays all day on Christmas Day?
Yeah.
Yeah, he literally makes us sit down and watch it wherever he's at. Like, it doesn't matter. And it starts all over and he's like, come on, we gotta watch it again. So, yeah, it was, I don't know. Well, for us, it was like a special movie.
Well, of course, yeah. I'm sure it would be. I mean, for me, I remember a few years back, like, technically speaking, it was used. I consider it a short film because it was like 5 minutes. And it was like, because the whole thing is, I mean, that's long for it to be
It's a long movie, yeah.
Well, I mean, what's a long movie?
The first one?
No, I'm not talking about Christmas Story. I'm talking about, for me, I know what that's like because a few years ago, there was something else that was like aired as like a long commercial, but it's really like a 5-minute short film. And that was basically the legacy sequel to E.T., which was E.T. Something Holiday.
Oh, yeah.
And it had Henry Thomas back. And E.T. comes back. And I remember just watching that and just like, so many emotions flooded through me. I'm like, what am I feeling?
Yeah.
This is like, wow. And of course, E.T. is like one of my favorite movies ever. And so it's like, wow. I understand what that's like.
Have you seen the interview with Drew Barrymore and the cast of E.T.?
The recent one?
Uh-huh.
I've read. I need to. I've read excerpts from it and it was really interesting. But I need to watch that interview. I know one of the excerpts I read is that Steven Spielberg made sure that she believed that E.T. was real, or the puppeteers made her believe, because she was a little girl back then, that E.T. was just another cast member on the set, which was really sweet to hear. Oh man,
yeah, I would be terrified.
I'm sure you would. A lot of us, a whole generation was terrified by E.T. Let's be real. Our generation was spooked when we watched him in the first, because seeing his face like, when Elliot finds him in the backyard.
When he's like all pale and white, oh my god, that freaked me out. You have no idea.
God, aren't movies a wonderful thing? Jeez, man. Anyway, I think we can go ahead and leave it there. Thank you, Alexis, for taking 3 hours out of your day to come and do this podcast. It was definitely a conversation that needed to be had. And for all of you who are listening out there, of course, stay tuned here wherever you listen to podcasts for more episodes of Red Spotlight as we delve into I don't think there's any big streaming shows left this year, but we definitely have.
Excuse me, National Treasure comes out next week.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. That's right, that comes out next week. In addition to some big movies that feature, of course, The Whale, Avatar, and Babylon, and whatever else we get into. Have a great December, guys. It's the height of holiday shopping and it can be stressful, but thank you for choosing us to, take some time out of your day and listen to. Thank you, Alexis, for being here. And catch us back next time to see what we can bring you out of under our spotlight. Bye-bye.